If you can hear this, you're probably already deaf. Hey everybody, welcome to this version of reality. My name is Liam Allstar. Well, not legally, but let's just go with that for now. So, it's almost time, isn't it? It's time to post your vote, cast your vote, do whatever you want with the vote, just vote yes or no on this whole referendum, this whole plebiscite with regards to whether or not you're okay with people marrying if they're the same gender. Or rather, we should have called it a gender issue, gender equality, gender, more like it's because I gotta say, this whole thing is, as everyone says, regardless of whether you are for or whether you are against, there's one thing that both sides can certainly agree to, is that this issue is it's a costly issue. It is taking a lot of time and a lot of money that we could be putting towards better purposes. Now, the Australian plebiscites, this is not even binding. It's not even something that may even go ahead. They could still say no at the end of the day, just to be put through to our parliament, to our government, to say, well, do you actually want to go through with it? And I guess we can still find some way to say, no, it's not going to go ahead if it votes yes. But at the same time, if people in the majority vote no, then at the same time, people, another government could come in and just change it anyway. It's not going to make a difference. Except for those in the gay and lesbian community. Their rights are being brought into question. Now, I'm taking a different approach to this than a lot of other people, because people are saying, well, I would vote yes because, they should have the same rights as we do. They should have the right to be married and be happy and, have every single right that a straight married couple would have. And the no crowd is obviously because, perhaps their religious views or just they're traditional. We don't want the rules to change because the definition is between a man and a woman. It's going to change the definition. It's going to ruin the sanctity of holy matrimony. And not only that, because there are some people that say that it's a gateway. It opens the floodgates, that it could lead to people literally marrying animals, and like literally, if someone says, I got to have the pussy, it'll quite literally mean that they'll probably start making out with their cat or something. I don't know. But there are some legitimate concerns that are brought in, but unfortunately they're convoluted. Many of them are lies. And the fact is that they're irrelevant to this whole discussion. The only thing that this is about is marriage. Just simply marriage. To extend the legal definition, or at the very least to amend it to include gay marriage or lesbian marriage as a alternative means so that we can get on with this. Now, we all know the story of how this all started. We all know how much it's costing, over $120 million in Australia. And we know that there are other countries around the world who have passed gay and lesbian marriage, and the list of countries that have passed and where it is actually legal I mean, you could find it anywhere, and I'm pulling it up right now so that I've got my fact-checking right. It's something that's actually kind of rare, isn't it? So, we've got a whole bunch of countries that have just gone and passed it. You know, countries in South Africa, countries throughout Asia, countries all the way throughout Europe, America, Canada, even in Mexico, even across the border, across other states and other lines and other places, where in South America, you know, you could go as far as Iceland or other places, and you could find, let's see here, where's this place? Where am I clicking on? What's that country there? Is that a country? Who knows? There's a whole list of countries around. I'm trying to pull it up right now, but not having too much luck. I've got a fast computer that we fixed. Ah, there it is. So, there's so many polls, and the countries that have legalized same-sex marriage nationwide: Argentina, Belgium, Bermuda, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, Finland, France, Iceland, I was right on that one, Ireland, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands. Well, we've got New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, United States, and Uruguay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's legal in all states, but, you know, or maybe it is, but there are certain states that may still dispute, but still, it's an indication that it is legalized. You know, same-sex marriage is legalized, at least for the majority part. And there are countries where same-sex marriage is legal in certain parts of the country, which I guess you really should be including US in that list, but, I mean, Wikipedia is Wikipedia, right? That's where I'm getting my facts from, people. That's where you need to get yours from. Because, you know, well, that's my reliability. Take mine for a grain of salt. Mexico and United Kingdom. I would say probably United States as well, because they do tend to, you know, state by state, but then what do I know, right? Who am I to dispute with the internet, right? Who am I to dispute with Wikipedia? And yet, countries elsewhere, I mean, that's for them to decide in their own time, you know. But for now, we've got countries like Algeria, Armenia, Australia, there we go. Good old Australia. Austria, Bahamas, Belarus, Belize, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bolivia, Bulgaria, Chile, China, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, El Salvador, Estonia, Georgia, Germany, Ghana, Greece, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Hungary, India, Indonesia, Israel, Iraq, Jamaica, Japan, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Latvia, Lithuania, Malaysia, Moldova, Morocco, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Philippines, Poland, Romania, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Serbia, Singapore, Slovakia, Slovenia, South Korea, Sudan, Suriname, Switzerland, Syria, Taiwan, Thailand, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Turkey, Uganda, Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, Venezuela, Vietnam, and Zimbabwe. Now, just because all those have not legalized, just because all those haven't legalized in certain parts, those are just opinion polls that I mentioned. And for those countries that were aforementioned, obviously the ones that I last mentioned that are in majority, or at least in the, you know, the most majority, greater or almost equal, but then the fact is that it is just a matter of time where they will all come together and decide. But are these all countries where it is an issue? I mean, I guess so. But one by one, we are resolving this issue by legalizing gay and lesbian marriage. We are not talking about all these other topics that people try and drag in. For example, it's going to break up families. How? If people, it's going to lead to people into bestiality. That's not going to happen. And that's the reason why, because, the ads going around, stupid ads that are coming around saying, that there's going to be this many genders, there's going to be, people wearing dresses, and it's like, there are some people that do that anyway. But it's taking away from the fact that logic, think about it, logic, common sense would stop a lot of this. You're essentially saying that if it's a gateway to all these bad things, then basically what you're saying is that humanity is already screwed, because we don't know what we're doing. We don't know right from wrong. So you mean to say that anyone and everyone tomorrow could just run their car through traffic because, run red lights and, run over sidewalks and do all that crap, or even commit terroristic act because they just, it's just no common sense. There are, in fact, there obviously, we've seen evidence of that, where there are certain individuals, but common sense says that the majority of people would obviously not do that. Why? Because common sense, because if your ethics are in order, if you've got morals, you've got logic, then you'd know that it's just not something that is right. And if you use that as an excuse, then essentially you're discrediting every single person around you, including yourself. That's what a lot of people think, that, oh, well, if we're going to do that, then it's going to lead to this. Like, you're the one thinking that. You are the only one thinking that, so obviously you're the one who has the issue. You're the only one that takes issue. Now, what the hell was I just on about? The opinion polls, where it's been legalised. But we're talking about Australia here, because let's face facts. It's relevant right now. We have the postal vote. Or whenever you're listening to this, this may have very well gone, past, failed, or otherwise. It really doesn't matter, because I'm not here to discuss the yes. I'm not here to discuss the no. I'm not here so much to debate the yes or to debate the no. I'm here to discuss things in this version of reality. Marriage equality. Why are we deciding? Why are we voting? Why? If it is legal, why are we bothering? It should just be bang, done. Is it illegal? No. And what's the problem? Pass it. Oh, but the definition of marriage between a man and a woman. Okay. That's straight marriage. Or just marriage. Normal marriage. That's why they're calling it gay marriage or same-sex marriage. Your personal opinions have no effect on these people because they live a separate life to you. And here's the thing that they're all worried about, that maybe it's going to be a desolate, it's going to be this society that's just going to collapse on itself. There's going to be just women marrying women, men marrying men. That's, the men know what men want, women know what women want. It's going to be the end of heterosexual society as we know it. Be like a mass genocide. No one's going to survive this. A barren wasteland. Well, here's the thing. Heterosexuals, with all due respect to any gay lesbians, or otherwise, who are listening to this right now, and they acknowledge this as well, the heterosexuals are by far the majority. By far the majority. How many gay people do you know? You may think you know a lot, but in reality, you probably only know a few. Because in reality, there are really only a few in comparison to the more than a few dozen that are hetero. Now, my problem with the yes and the no. Why am I saying we shouldn't be voting for yes? We shouldn't be voting for no. We just shouldn't be voting. Because my belief is that this is the same slippery slope. The exact same slippery slope has occurred too many times in history. Think about this. Think about the fact that a long time ago, there was such a thing as women's rights. And women weren't even allowed to vote. Men vote. Women were not allowed to vote. In certain places, there's still not. Women have less rights than men. Men having more rights than women doesn't take anything away from, it does basically, you don't gain anything from it. But women having rights doesn't take anything away from men. It's just putting it on an equal playing field. But even to this day, there are still people that are of the opinion that, women should be paid less and women should only be the childbearer in the house, and, they should, some say, just cover yourself up and hide yourself indoors, and, women aren't allowed to fraternize, have friends, and do this or do that. There are abusive husbands that say you cook and clean for me and do nothing else, and you service my undercarriage every now and then. And by every now and then, I mean every time I say now and then. Otherwise, a little bit of that. It's just ridiculous. But what did we do? We decided it would benefit us. It would benefit women for them to have rights. And besides, what have women done in society? They have done a lot. And still, it's a choice. Women can still be the housewife. Or they can be the career woman. Or they can be both. Or they can be whatever they need to be. And whatever they, perhaps want to be in their life. They could be a star tennis player like Serena Williams. Or they could be, just a career housewife. Where they stay at home, upkeep the household. Maybe they run a business. Maybe they be the organizer of a charity. Maybe they could do any of those things. But the fact is that they are given the right to do that. And that they are free to do what they need to do what they want. But there are obviously certain conditions, that obviously you can't just go and, go out, and women can't then go and take rights away from men and oppress men. They can't do all these things, because that would still be wrong. Women having rights does not mean that they then get to go around and run amok in society. Because guess what? There are laws. Fact of the matter is that we once had an issue. And we still do. We've heard a lot about it. What am I talking about exactly? Oh, just a little something called black versus white. We've dealt with this in many ways, in many shapes, in many forms, in many different countries. We have seen, for example, in South Africa, the apartheid. We have seen America, the slavery, and the segregation and the inequality. And in Australia, once again, we have seen the attempted assimilation, the forced assimilation of the Aborigines of the country, and a near genocide attempt. You'd be surprised if you actually look around, and a history which is being withheld to a degree with regards to Australian history in particular, where a lot of it is just not acknowledged, because if it were, then perhaps we would learn something. if we acknowledged all of that and realized that, hang on a second, with regards to, we've got the women's rights, we've got the, black, or, people of other colour, people of other race, people of other religion. We've seen this time and time again. We are faced with a very easy decision. Very easy decision here. And that is to just simply get it over. Because when we talk about women's rights, men decide whether women get to vote, as well as women deciding whether women get to vote. If this were truly equality, would you think that decision would be, okay, we're going to ask the women, and only the women, when it talks about black lives, Black Lives Matter. If we would talk about black rights of any kind, then we would say, okay, then we're going to decide, because even in Australia, even in America, African Americans, were they allowed to vote? Were they granted equal rights? Even to this day, there are some times where you can definitely say that there's still that little bit of inequality there. And to that, playing devil's advocate, when you consider the fact that it was pretty much only, maybe 50, about 50 years ago or so, that black rights had started to come to prominence. So that opposed to 500-600 years of oppression, slavery, and even a genocide to a degree, or attempted genocide in many different ways. Wow. Consider the fact that it's been practically 1/10 of the time period in comparison. And while it's not something that we should be accepting, you can almost say, I understand. Because these people who are raised to believe this, it's only been this many years compared to all those years where it was not acceptable for African Americans to have rights, like even Australia, not granted equal rights, not even granted the right to vote. Aborigines, not, the stolen generation, all of that. It's something that you almost have no words for it. But that's common sense once again. Common sense and logic says what was done to them is not right. And if we could do it over again, it should never have been put to a vote, should never have been a matter of question, should not even been a discussion, should have just been wake up one morning, go straight into local government and say, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. See those guys over there? Yeah? Or see those girls over there? See that group, that people, those people? Yeah? They're going to have the same rights we do. Why? Oh, you're asking why? Because they're exactly like us in every way, shape and form. When you think about it, there really is no difference. It's all basically the same genetic makeup. We're all human beings at the end of the day. It shouldn't be a matter of questioning or even deciding, putting it to a vote. It should not even be, apartheid, for example. The divisiveness, all of that for the so-called greater good. And who did it benefit? Because it never really benefited anyone. It still doesn't, it never did. And to this day, it has hurt us as a people. Because all that divide has weakened us. And now, we're all concerned about the rights of two people who just want to be legally recognized in marriage. Now, that's not asking too much, because there are a lot of things that go with marriage and the technicalities that are used by the law, because, sure, we recognize that it is not illegal in Australia. But here's the kicker. In Australia, even though it's not illegal for two men or two women to be in what is known as a civil union, a civil union is not marriage. It is not something that will grant the same rights as a married couple. So that means there are less rights when it comes to, let's say estates, when it comes to parental rights, when it comes to a lot of those things, just the equality across that. Let's say a person's boyfriend, one man's boyfriend dies, and after years of being together, the government would then, as a matter of the estate, no matter how airtight your will is, no matter how you put your affairs in order, the brother or the sister who might be estranged, who may very well have had nothing to do with them for all that time, perhaps because they chose to live in that way, that lifestyle, and now they've come back and said, if you do that, I'm going to have nothing to do with you. You take your lifestyle and you shove it, you get away from me, And then when they die, let's say they were successful entrepreneurs in a business. Let's say they both, ran it and earned millions. Let's say they invested in property, like a lot of people seem to do in Australia. Like the only way you can actually earn money in Australia these days is through property, through renting, through being a tenant. Now, that person who is deceased, his estate, his will goes to the next, to the next family member, to the next of kin. But because a civil union or domestic partnership is not recognized officially, legally as a marriage. It is just simply two people in a relationship. I mean, it's basically the same as two people being in a relationship for years but not in a marriage, like a man and a woman. Which means that all those people who perhaps had nothing to do with them, perhaps that were disowned, or just estranged for whatever reason, maybe they were drug addicts, maybe they're just toxic people, maybe they were abusive, maybe they wanted nothing to do with them until they found out that they were dead and that they had all this property, all this money, or all these possessions. Maybe they're just coming around to see what they can get out of it. Damn well I know a lot of family that would do that in, my situation. If my will and everything wasn't certainly in order, there'd be people that I hadn't seen in years coming and knocking on the door and saying, where's my whatever, gimme. It's like, who the hell are you? I'm the family member, I am this person. It's like, well, I'm the person who he was with for this many years, I'm the love of his life. Yeah, well, the government doesn't recognize you as anyone important enough to handle the estates, who handle all the affairs, and where's all that money going to go to? It goes to the family. That's the thing. It's like a civil union doesn't, you're not unified as husband or wife and wife, however they, or want to call themselves in the terminology. I guess that would be what it is, or whatever they choose it to be at that time when this whole thing gets sorted with. But then it's like, okay, so now you're going to have a dispute in a state. It's got to be heard before a judge or adjudicator, whoever, it's got to go to court. And and that's not to say that they don't take all these possessions and then the law's on their side because, well, they're family. They're the brother or they're the sister or they're the, they're the mother or the father, or, and they get, they get all the rights. They have right on their side. The law is on their side because that's how it's written. Which means that a person who is a same-sex couple is at an extreme disadvantage in that situation. When it pertains to custodial rights, it is another thing right there, where simply put, they are allowed, it is legal for them to raise a child together. But if something were to happen, or let's say the abusive father or the abusive mother, says, I'm taking the kid and you're not going to see them again. And, let's say they've got the custodial right, particularly, maybe a vengeful mother in this instance, who takes the child and says, you're never going to see your child again. Well, what rights do the father and, I guess, the stepfather in this instance would have? What rights do they have? I mean, you take the child's, and it's gone. It says, but, me and my husband, she's the abusive, she's this, she's that. Yeah, but she's got the rights. Why? Because that's what it says in law. She has custodial rights, and because you two aren't legally recognized as a couple, it's what's written. And because of that, well, unfortunately, you miss out. Custodial rights with regards to deceased estates, as well as, with regards to parenting. The stepfather is not going to be recognized as the stepfather, just the partner of the deceased. So that would not have any rights in terms of custodial. In terms of adoption, there are a lot of, there's a lot of tape, there's a lot of grey areas. In many instances, a same-sex couple will not be granted custody of a foster or a child for adoption, but say a couple who adopts a child and are neglectful, abusive, and the child end up dying in their custody, have more rights than a loving, caring same-sex couple. And I've seen that many times now, and it's very sad and unfortunate that also in many instances that an abusive mother with now an abusive new husband, the new man in the life, and will have more rights than, say, if the father ended up deciding to have a same-sex relationship and now the child stays in custody of the abusive mother because there's a mother and a father in the household because they granted the rights, etc., etc. But enough of that, because we could go on and on about the in-betweens and but people do want to know just exactly what the other person's going to do. How are they going to vote? What's their decision? Now, this is something that's been in my most successful, or at least one of my most successful comedy routines, where I have poked fun at it, and in a constructive and criticizing way, but also a way that is entertaining and also supportive. And every time that I've gone into the routine, I have said, there's one part in my routine where I go to the audience, I say to them, I believe in marriage equality, hands together if you agree. And they put their hands together and clap. I go, basically, really put your hands together, let them hear it all the way in Parliament House. And the people cheer. I'm yet to hear a boo. I'm yet to hear someone, because the people who don't agree perhaps just don't applaud, and that's fine. But you know what? I do it ironically, because my point is at the end where I state, yeah, I just saved, and then I say some amount of money depending on who's in the audience. A couple of times I said, save $50,000 on a postal vote right there, and I count, how many yeses was that? So, it's ironic in itself, because it's like, by me just going, hey, how many people here, who agrees? Who's standing up for, and they put their hands together. It's like all these people just put their hands together, and that's a resounding yes from this crowd here. So that should already be known. That should already be there. What gets me is that there was a census in Australia quite some time ago, and regularly there is a census that we have, which basically a poll, a study, or whatever you want to call it. For those who don't know what it is, it's basically a survey which states, wants to ask you a bunch of questions. Are you male? Are you female? Are you other? Are you this? Are you that? Asks you your profession, how much money you earn, what you do, who you are, where you live. All these questions. Just imagine how much money they would have saved on all this if they had put one additional question in there. Just slip it in. Just slip it right in there, and they could have saved so much money, so much time. And this divisiveness that has come about, that people that are actually spending money to buy ad time and that are taking time from their jobs to protest, that are doing all these things, handing out flyers and basically protesting, for buying billboards and, going all around the place. And, I'm not going to say that both sides are, definitely innocent. There may be one side that may be more guilty than the other, maybe more oppressive than the other. Certainly the no side, you could say, is definitely more oppressive. But there are even people on the yes side of the agenda that have gotten violent, that have tried to push their agenda forward. And there are people on the no side which are obviously, they press their views forward, and there are some people that have gotten violent physically and, certainly verbally abusive. There are people that have, become depressed, who can't handle it emotionally or mentally, psychologically. They have been, hurt by this, that it's causing a divide, that it is splitting people, that people with agendas, people who take offense to it, people are being exposed to things that they shouldn't have any part in. The answer to the question, will I vote yes, will I vote no? I will keep that to myself and say, obviously, if you know me well enough, you already know what the hell the goddamn answer is. It shouldn't even be a question, and that is my answer right there. It shouldn't even be something that question. The people who vote yes, the people who vote no, should not be even given a forum to vote at all. Because if anyone's been listening to what I just said with regards to whites being able to vote on whether blacks have equal rights as them, men being able to vote whether the women should have equal rights to them. The same to be said about straight, heterosexual being able to vote on whether the homosexual, the gay and lesbian community should have the same rights that they do. The way it is that it's legal. While it's legal, then, hey, there is no reason why it shouldn't. And just because I may most definitely support it, I mean, there are still things that, don't get me wrong, there are still things that we should probably still discuss when we get into that. When we're pertaining to what happens next, when they get the rights, and, they really, if we've got any common sense, just do it. Okay? Just get it over and done with. But then there are things that are more important to discuss. And if we're going to keep on that discussion, well then okay, there are perhaps some things that when we go into it that we do need to discuss. But then at the same time, a lot of this is just plain straightforward. The fact that it is black and white right now, the fact that it has to be, it shouldn't be, it's just straightforward matter. You can't see right now, but oh my goodness gracious me. But this whole history that's been going down in Australia as of late, the fact that we've got a government that can and will and has done many things without our consent, without us voting on it. Like, for example, a little old-fashioned thing called penalty rates. Well, there were people that were smiling and grinning after they announced that in certain industries, in certain fields, in certain days, certain times, certain places, certain people will not be entitled to penalty rates on weekends and public holidays, or in the evenings, or when they are usually entitled to. Why? Because it's a drain on the finances of particular businesses. there was an easier way to go about that, is if, like a threshold, like with the tax threshold. If you're earning a certain amount of money, then certainly you can afford to give just a little extra to people who are basically getting to work on weekends or public holidays or in evenings. Otherwise, you just shouldn't be having that business open in those times if you can't afford it, because those are times which are unusual and out of the ordinary. And let's face facts, that in Australian society, when was weekend shopping available? The invention of the Saturday shop, that got people all going for that crazy Saturday shopping. And now it's been opened up to Sunday. Now all businesses operate on weekend, pretty much, except for local businesses which cannot afford to. And they put it at an incredible disadvantage. And while they're trying to say, because the local businesses which earn this much money, well, it's like, well, they're still not going to be affected by that because they just can't afford to employ anyone anyway. But now you've given big businesses the means and the measures to just pay their employees less and keep more in their pocket and justify, the fact that they're just going to have more money. Well, what are we going to do with it? I guess we just go on that spending spree, give ourselves another raise. Hey, here's another thing. The government just went and got themselves a raise. Politicians gave themselves a raise, even though we're supposed to be tightening our wallets and our belts, our waistlines, and spending less on this and that. We've got to be smart about our finances. We're spending money where we shouldn't. We're buying jets. When you look over in America, spending all the money on war, and it's like, well, we need war. We need to do it because it's protecting ourselves against terrorism. Several countries that are taking all these means and measures and spending money against anti-terrorism. And is it actually working? Oh, do you see a terrorist? Well, that's like me picking up this rock and saying that it's an anti-terrorist rock. Well, what does it do? Nothing! It's just a stupid rock! That's a little excerpt I kind of stole from The Simpsons there, if anyone got that. But still, it's like, it's true. That, say, for example, that I pick up this I've got a golf ball in my hand right now. And I say that with this golf ball, it will protect you from home invasions. How does it work? Well, it's a magic ball. But how does it work? It protects you from home invasion. With this, you will be safe from home invasion. Well, I guess I could, I suppose that, yeah, that makes sense. Give me 100 of them. Great, excellent. Spend money on it, and then figure out, it doesn't work. You know what? We need a golf club with that. Why? What's it do? Protects against home invasion. Does it? Yeah. Okay. But that only works if you catch them, right? Well, you know what? We need many golf clubs. We need a caddy. We need a go-kart. What's that going to do to protect? Oh, we can't be too careful. You see where I'm going with this, don't you? Government has, governments all around have made decisions without our consent. They haven't gone to the polls about taxes. And I'm sure that a lot of people would be saying right now, if we were to have ourselves a survey, a binding survey, or plebiscite, a postal vote, and to say, should we be making the big corporations liable for their fair share of taxes? And you know what they would say? Yes. They would mark yes so hard on that damn sheet that they would have to get another one because they would have just stabbed it right through the goddamn paper and ruined the desk. So at the same time as getting a second postal survey sheet sending out, the sale of tables would skyrocket in the country because they would just put that goddamn thing through the table right there. But yes, so it has come down to this. Now we have people who are probably going to come at me perhaps and say, you're wrong, or you go, you're right, and or perhaps I just let's just put it this way. The truth of the matter is, I'm speaking because I can, and because I've got a podcast to which I can get my opinion out. And that's all it is at the end of the day. Whether I'm right or wrong, that's all it is, just an opinion. I know there are going to be a lot of people that will, they will disagree with me. Be damned with modern days. Let's go back to ancient times. Oh, wait, there were same sex back in the ancient. Oh, well then how about medieval? That existed then too. The Renaissance existed then too. In modern day society. So, while we've got our senses, why don't we try and do better? Be better than we are now. Give them the same rights because it's recognized as illegal. It's recognized as legal. The places where it is illegal, of course, we could say, throughout some parts of Eastern Europe, parts of Africa and otherwise, but they're becoming less and less through time. And the fact of the matter is that it is truly only a matter of time before we just move on to something that is worth a better discussion, because while we keep distracting ourselves with these constant petulant issues which make no difference to our society whatsoever, and there will be a lot of people, of course, that will say, from the religious aspect, it's the will of God. Well, it's like, well, okay, but it still doesn't pertain to you and I. If we are so-called straights, then what's your problem? But they're going against. It's like, well, then just stop, because there are a lot of verses that may support, there are a lot of verses that may reject that notion that you're trying to put across. But at the end of the day as well, the one thing that everyone's got to understand is that, that's pretty much just an interpretation of an interpretation. How do you know that book's right? And there I go, I just put my foot in my mouth again. So I guess in advance I say apologies to anyone who is offended. Apologies to people who weren't offended. Apologies to everyone in between. But I do not apologize. Because it is nothing but an opinion. And at the end of the day, this whole podcast is going to be absolutely meaningless. Everything that I say is going to make no difference whatsoever. All this voting, all this for, all this against is not going to make a difference, because you can't help the way that a person feels about another person. A feeling that a person has for another person. For just loving another person. For choosing to love, to pursue that love, and to go into a relationship with another person of the same sex. It is recognized as legal, particularly in Australia. It is not illegal. You cannot be arrested for it. So then, why are we not then going that step further and just putting that stamp on it and saying, right, why do we have to do all this? Why do we have to spend money? Why do we have to waste time? And how do we want to be remembered in society? As an inclusive one? As a loving, caring society? Or one that was oppressive and more interested in spending money, wasting money, keeping money, and then justifying the next lot of taxes? Because, don't get me wrong, this is something that the government has the money to spend. But they could have done it for free. They should have done it for free. They should have removed emotion and removed circumstance from the situation and just looked at it more logically, but they couldn't do it. And if they can't do it, then they shouldn't be in charge. They shouldn't be in a position where they are supposed to look at everything from an equal standpoint, because that is not right. That is not how society is supposed to function. That is not how a government is supposed to function. Let them marry in holy matrimony, whatever you want to call it, let them have their marriage. I think I'm most about a speech right now, so I'm going to call it there. I'm going to say thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. My name is Liam, and if you're not offended by all the discussion, then I will see you guys next time.